What if the real reason most habits fail is not that people aim too low, but that they keep trying to change outcomes without changing identity? Welcome. We are starting Atomic Habits by James Clear, and before this book gives you tactics, trackers, or habit loops, it quietly changes the frame. This is not mainly a book about motivation. It is a book about becoming the kind of person for whom good actions feel normal. Clear begins with his own story because it explains why he distrusts dramatic transformation myths. He was a teenager hit in the face by a baseball bat, left with serious injuries, memory problems, and a long recovery. The version of success he later built did not come from one cinematic comeback day. It came from small routines repeated when life still felt messy. Sleeping better, keeping his room in order, lifting weights consistently, studying with more discipline. None of those habits looked heroic in isolation. Together, they changed the direction of his life. That is the first big idea of the book. Habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. A tiny change today may feel irrelevant. 1% better sounds almost insulting when your life feels stuck and your ambition is large. But the math of habits is not linear. Repeated long enough, very small advantages create very large gaps. One person improves a little, the other drifts a little, and after enough time the difference no longer looks small. Clear loves examples like British cycling for this reason. The team did not become dominant because of one genius speech or one giant new training secret. They pursued what he calls the aggregation of marginal gains. If each piece of the system improved a little, the whole performance changed. That principle is larger than sports. A better morning routine, a slightly easier workout setup, a cleaner desk, a more consistent bedtime, a lower friction study habit, and a little less mindless scrolling do not feel revolutionary. But habits do not need to feel revolutionary to be decisive. One reason people miss this is what Clear calls the plateau of latent potential. We expect progress to arrive in a straight line. We work for a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month, and if the visible result is small, we assume the method is broken. But habits often store results before they reveal them. You are casting votes for a future identity long before the scoreboard looks impressive. The body changes later. The savings account feels meaningful later. The writing skill feels real later. The confidence appears later. The early phase is not proof that nothing is happening. It is often the phase where the roots are forming underground. This matters because disappointment is where most habit plans die. People want immediate validation for a behavior whose payoff is delayed. They say, I went to the gym 3 times. Why am I not transformed? I wrote for a week. Why is my work still average? I saved money this month. Why do I still feel financially behind? Clear's answer is not harsh, but it is firm. You are mistaking the timing of visible results for the value of repeated action. Then the book makes one of its strongest turns. Goals are not enough. Goals can be useful for direction, but systems are what produce change. Everybody wants the good result. Winners and losers often share similar goals. The goal cannot be the distinguishing factor because many people want the same thing. The difference comes from the process they run every day. That is why Clear says you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. If your room, calendar, phone, environment, routines, and default decisions keep pushing you toward distraction, no amount of motivational wallpaper will save you for long. If your daily system supports focus, good behavior becomes more repeatable even on ordinary, imperfect days. This point also protects you from the emotional crash that comes after a goal is reached. If your entire identity is tied to winning something, finishing something, or hitting a number, what happens next? Many people snap back to old behavior because the goal was a temporary target, not a durable operating system. Systems make behavior less fragile because they change how your day is organized, not just what you are chasing. Clear then moves to identity, which is where the book becomes more than productivity advice. Most people try to build habits from the outside in. They focus on outcomes first. Lose weight, write a book, save money, run a marathon. Then they think about the process. Identity usually stays vague. The better path, he argues, is inside out. Ask, who is the kind of person who would do this consistently? A person who wants to write is chasing an outcome. A person who sees themselves as a writer asks, what would a writer do today? A person who wants to get fit is chasing a result. A person building the identity of someone who trains asks, what would a healthy, disciplined person do next? Every action becomes a vote for the type of person you believe yourself to be. This is why habits stick better when they align with identity. People are far more likely to repeat a behavior that confirms who they think they are. They're also more likely to sabotage a behavior that feels like a costume. If deep down you still see yourself as disorganized, every clean week feels temporary. If you still see yourself as someone who always quits, consistency feels like borrowed clothing. Identity is not changed by one thought. It's changed by evidence. Repeated action is that evidence. Clear does not claim a single action proves everything. Missing one workout does not make you lazy. Writing one page does not make you a master author. But each repetition casts a vote. Habits are a way of accumulating proof. Over time, the questions shift from "can I do this?" to "this is the sort of thing I do." That leads directly into the four-step pattern that runs through the rest of the book. Cue, craving, response, reward. Habits begin when something triggers attention. That cue creates a desire for a change in state. Then comes the response, the behavior itself, if it is easy and attractive enough. Finally, reward teaches the brain whether the loop is worth remembering. Good habits are built by shaping those four stages. Bad habits are broken by disrupting them. This model is simple on purpose. Clear wants behavior change to feel teachable, not mystical. If a habit is missing, ask where the chain is weak. Is the cue invisible? Is the craving too abstract? Is the response too hard? Is the reward too delayed? The book will spend the next sections turning each of those questions into practical design rules. But before we get to the laws, the philosophical foundation matters. Habits are not about becoming a machine. They're about taking behaviors that currently depend on mood and making them more reliable. They're about reducing negotiation. They're about proving something to yourself in a way motivation alone rarely can. There's also a quiet emotional relief in this framework. If your progress is slow, that does not automatically mean you're broken. It may mean your system is weak, your environment is noisy, your cues are unclear, or your behavior still asks for too much effort at the wrong moment. That is a design problem more than a character flaw. This first part of Atomic Habits, therefore, gives us the book's durable foundation. Tiny changes matter because they compound. Systems matter because goals alone do not govern daily behavior. Identity matters because people repeat actions that fit who they believe they are. And the habit loop matters because behavior follows a pattern that can be shaped. Thank you for spending this first part with me. In the next episode, we move into the first law, make it obvious, where Clear starts turning theory into practical design. Awareness, implementation intentions, environment cues, and why self-control is often less impressive than good setup. Final close. Lasting change usually does not begin when you demand a better result from yourself. It begins when you build tiny evidence that you are becoming a different person. Most bad habits do not begin with rebellion. They begin with autopilot. Welcome back. Atomic Habits now moves into the first law, make it obvious. This is where James Clear gets practical. If a behavior starts with a cue, then the first question is not how do I try harder? It is what in my world is already nudging me, and what am I failing to notice because the behavior has become automatic? Clear opens with a story about a medical worker who could sense something was wrong with a patient before the instrument showed it. That story is not there to make habits sound magical. It illustrates how pattern recognition gets embedded through repetition. The brain becomes efficient. It stops narrating every decision in full because it has seen this movie before. That efficiency helps us function, but it also hides behavior from us. Many habits happen before we examine them. You unlock the phone. You open the app. You wander to the snack. You postpone the task. You say yes to the meeting. You do the familiar thing because it is familiar. By the time awareness arrives, the routine may already be underway. So the first step is not discipline. It is observation. Clear suggests a habit scorecard. Write down what you actually do. Wake up. Check phone. Shower. Coffee. Email. Social media. Commute. Snack. Delay. Scroll. Late night video. None of this sounds profound, but honesty about reality is more useful than inspirational fiction about who you hope to be. The habit scorecard matters because many people evaluate themselves morally before they evaluate themselves accurately. They think, I am lazy, distracted, inconsistent, chaotic. Clear wants a cleaner first question. What is happening? Which behaviors are serving me, and which are quietly steering me somewhere I do not want to go? Awareness gives you leverage. Vague guilt does not. He also introduces the idea that habits become easier to change when they are named in concrete, situational terms. That is where implementation intentions come in. Instead of saying I should read more, say I will read for 15 minutes at 9 p.m. on the couch after I put my phone in the other room. The point is to remove ambiguity. A general intention leaves too much space for future you to improvise an excuse. This is one of the recurring strengths of the book. Clear keeps translating abstract desire into environmental or time-based design. People often assume motivation fails because they are weak. Often motivation fails because the plan was fuzzy. When a behavior has no obvious entry point, the brain defaults to whatever is easier or more immediate. Habit stacking works on the same principle. Attach the new behavior to an existing one. After I make coffee, I will review my task list. After I brush my teeth, I will floss. After I sit at my desk, I will write one paragraph. The existing habit becomes a cue for the new one. You are piggybacking on a pathway the brain already trusts. That makes the book less about self-reinvention and more about continuity. You do not need to rebuild your whole life from raw materials. You often need to link better actions to routines that are already stable. The day already has anchors. The question is whether you're using them deliberately. Then Clear turns to environment, and this chapter should bother anyone who still thinks willpower is the main engine of consistency. He argues that the environment often matters more than motivation because visible cues drive behavior more aggressively than people admit. We tend to think we choose actions freely while ignoring how often the room, the screen, the layout, and the defaults are choosing first. If fruit is hidden and junk food is visible, one decision gets easier. If your guitar is in the closet, practice becomes theoretical. If the book is on the pillow and the phone charger is across the room, a different evening begins to feel more natural. This is not cheating. This is design. Good environments reduce the need for heroic restraint. That is why Clear says the people with the best self-control are often the people who need to use it least. They are not necessarily resisting temptation all day with saint-like intensity. Often they have simply arranged life so the temptations show up less often. The candy is not on the counter. The distracting app is not on the home screen. The desk is ready before the work session starts. The running shoes are already out. This idea is freeing because it shifts attention from internal drama to external setup. Instead of promising yourself that next time you'll be stronger, ask whether next time should be made easier. If the cue for a bad habit is constant and the cue for a good habit is hidden, your system is misaligned. Clear also points out that context matters. Habits get linked not only to time, but to places. A couch can become a cue for binge watching. A desk can become a cue for procrastination if that is where you habitually avoid hard work. One way to rebuild behavior is to give spaces clearer jobs. A corner for reading, a desk for writing, a table for planning. When a space becomes associated with one primary action, starting gets easier. This does not mean life needs to become sterile or obsessive. It means the environment should stop fighting the behavior you claim to want. Many people say they want focus while living inside a system built for interruption. They say they want healthier eating while filling the kitchen with instant cues for the opposite. They say they want calmer evenings while treating the phone like a permanent extension of the hand. The first law also contains an implicit challenge about honesty. If you keep returning to a bad habit, perhaps the cue is more obvious than you admit. The notification, the route home, the friend group, the kitchen counter, the browser tab, the stress cue after work. It is easier to say, I slipped, than to say I built a daily trigger and left it untouched. That is why Clear's approach remains practical. Make good cues visible. Put the book where the phone usually goes. Put the water bottle on the desk. Put the gym clothes by the door. Leave a notebook open. Schedule the behavior in a specific place. Make the starting point hard to miss. At the same time, make bad cues less visible. Hide the snack. Remove the app. Change the route. Turn off the trigger. Put friction between you and the old automatic behavior. You do not need to prove toughness by living inside a minefield. You need to make repeated action sustainable. A subtle but important point runs underneath all this. Self-control still matters, but it is a poor first line of defense when design could do the work earlier. People overestimate character in the moment and underestimate structure beforehand. Clear is always asking how the moment can be redesigned before the moment arrives. This makes the first law a lesson in humility as much as strategy. You're not always making decisions in a clean, rational vacuum. You are reacting to what is obvious, available, and repeated. If that is true, then changing the visible world around you is not a minor trick. It is one of the main levers of behavioral change. Thank you for staying with this second part. Next, we move into the second law, make it attractive, where Clear tackles craving directly. Dopamine, temptation bundling, social influence, and the uncomfortable truth that many habits stick because they satisfy emotional desires long before they produce external results. Final close. If a habit starts with a cue, the smartest move is often not to promise better willpower. It is to make the right cue hard to miss and the wrong cue harder to obey. People rarely repeat habits because logic alone told them to. Welcome back. The second law of atomic habits is make it attractive. And that phrase matters because behavior is not driven only by what is useful. It is driven by what feels appealing in the moment. You can know something is good for you and still avoid it. You can know something is destructive and still reach for it. Desire is the bridge between knowledge and action, which means habits get stronger when the brain learns to look forward to them. Clear starts with dopamine because the anticipation of reward is often what moves us. People like to imagine they act when the reward arrives, but much of behavior is launched by the expectation of reward. The craving is not the thing itself. It is the imagined shift in state. Relief, status, pleasure, progress, belonging, stimulation, calm. That distinction matters because habits are not pursued for their own sake. No one wants the cigarette itself in some abstract vacuum. They want the feeling they associate with it. No one wants the workout only as mechanical repetition. They want energy, strength, pride, or progress. We chase the change in feeling the habit promises. This is why temptation bundling works. Pair something you need to do with something you want to do. Listen to a favorite podcast only while walking. Watch a show only while folding laundry or using the treadmill. Make the desirable thing a companion to the useful thing. The point is not manipulation in a sinister sense. The point is to let the brain associate the routine with something it already enjoys. Clear is also realistic about social influence. Human beings are herd-sensitive creatures. We imitate the close, the many, and the powerful. We learn norms from family, friends, peers, and culture long before we call those norms habits. If everyone around you treats late-night drinking, reactive phone use, or constant busyness as normal, those behaviors gain social gravity. If your circle values reading, training, reflection, or craftsmanship, those behaviors start to look natural. That is why belonging matters so much in behavior change. People do not only want the outcome of a habit, they want the identity and membership that can come with it. A person joins a running group, and suddenly the behavior is not just cardio. It is participation in a tribe. A person studies in a group where focus is normal and concentration feels less lonely. Social proof turns friction down. This can be used badly or well. Culture can normalize habits that hollow people out. It can also normalize discipline, honesty, and standards that lift people. Clear's point is not simply choose better friends like a fortune cookie slogan. His point is that the environment of desire is social. If you live in a setting where the good behavior is admired and the bad behavior is inconvenient or embarrassing, behavior starts changing almost sideways. The book also suggests something very practical. Reframe habits around what they enable rather than what they demand. Instead of saying, I have to meditate, say, I get to build a calmer mind. Instead of I have to budget, say, I get to buy freedom later. Instead of I have to practice, say, I get to become competent. This is not fake positivity. It is an attempt to highlight the benefit your brain is overlooking when it fixates on immediate discomfort. Clear then flips the law for breaking bad habits. If you want to reduce a behavior, make it unattractive. Highlight the cost. Stop romanticizing the indulgence and start naming the consequence. The sugar rush is followed by the crash. The procrastination protects comfort now, but creates panic later. The impulsive purchase feels exciting for 5 minutes and heavy for 5 weeks. The bad habit survives partly because the mind edits the bill. This is why many self-destructive routines continue under polite euphemisms. Doom scrolling becomes staying informed. Overwork becomes ambition. Constant checking becomes being responsive. Mindless spending becomes treating yourself. Clear keeps dragging the behavior back into view. What is the habit actually costing you? Time? Energy? Self-trust? Sleep? Attention? Money? Respect for your own priorities? The second law becomes especially interesting here because it shows that attraction is trainable. You can make a good habit feel more appealing by pairing it with pleasure, social approval, identity, or visible progress. You can weaken a bad habit by making its real cost emotionally vivid rather than intellectually abstract. Notice how much of this still depends on design, not self-scolding. If the workout playlist is ready, if the reading chair is comfortable, if the study ritual begins with something enjoyable, if the cooking setup feels less miserable, the behavior's emotional profile changes. Attraction is often built from the small rituals surrounding the habit, not only from the habit itself. This is important because many people sabotage consistency by making every good habit feel like punishment. The work is chaotic. The timing is inconvenient. The environment is ugly. The setup is rushed. Then they wonder why the behavior never feels natural. You do not need to make every good habit luxurious, but you should stop making the right thing unnecessarily joyless. There is also an identity angle again. A habit becomes more attractive when it aligns with a version of yourself you respect. If reading feels like evidence that you are becoming thoughtful, If training feels like proof that you are someone who follows through, if saving money feels like the posture of a future-focused adult, then the habit starts carrying emotional meaning beyond the task itself. At the same time, Clear quietly warns about the emotional pull of bad habits. They often offer quick certainty. Stimulation now. Relief now. Escape now. Recognition now. That is why good habits need not only moral superiority, but emotional credibility. They need to feel like a compelling path, not a dull lecture. The second law, therefore, asks a sharp question. What does your brain currently find attractive, and why? Is the appeal coming from pleasure, convenience, identity, belonging, escape, or avoidance? Until you can answer that honestly, behavior change stays shallow. You may remove one habit only to recreate the same craving in a different costume. Thank you for being here for part 3. Next, we move into the third law, make it easy, where Clear becomes merciless about friction. We will look at motion versus action, the law of least effort, the 2-minute rule, and commitment devices that make your future self less able to sabotage the plan. Final close. Habits do not move only when they are sensible. They move when they feel desirable, social, and emotionally believable in the moment you're asked to act. Many people stay busy preparing for change long enough to avoid changing. Welcome back. The third law of atomic habits is make it easy, and it cuts directly against the fantasy that progress is mostly about intensity. James Clear wants you to respect friction. If something is hard to start, complicated to repeat, or dependent on perfect conditions, it will be fragile no matter how inspiring the plan looked when you wrote it. He begins by separating motion from action. Motion feels productive. Researching, outlining, planning, comparing tools, reorganizing, downloading templates, buying supplies, watching one more video about how to begin. Action is what actually produces a result. You write the page. You do the workout. You make the sales call. You sit down and practice. The reason people get trapped in motion is obvious once Clear says it. Motion is safer. It allows the feeling of progress without the emotional risk of outcome. If I'm still planning, I cannot yet fail publicly. If I'm still optimizing my note-taking app, I do not need to confront whether I'm actually studying. Motion flatters the ego while postponing the scoreboard. That is why repetition matters more than the myth of perfect preparation. Habits are installed through reps. You learn the shape of the behavior by doing it, not by thinking about doing it with remarkable sophistication. The first draft of any useful habit is usually clumsy. The point is not elegance. The point is frequency. Clear then introduces the law of least effort. Human beings naturally gravitate toward the option that costs less energy. This is not a moral defect. It is a reality. The environment pushes behavior toward whatever path has the least resistance. If the good habit has 10 steps and the bad habit has 1 tap, the bad habit is already ahead before your higher values enter the room. This is why friction is such a powerful tool. Increase it for the habit, you want less. Reduce it for the habit, you want more. Put the guitar on a stand, not in the case. Prepare the workout, close the night before. Keep the healthy food visible. Move the TV remote farther away. Log out of the social app. Freeze the card. Leave the document open. The brain may still resist, but now resistance has less structural support. The book does not romanticize effort for its own sake. Clear is not saying meaningful work should always feel easy. He is saying the starting ritual should be easy enough that the behavior can begin before excuses multiply. The job is not to eliminate all effort. The job is to eliminate unnecessary effort at the moment of launch. That is where the 2-minute rule becomes so useful. Scale the habit down to the version that takes 2 minutes or less. Read before bed becomes read 1 page. Do yoga becomes take out the mat. Study every night becomes open the notes. Run 3 miles becomes put on your running shoes. The first version should feel almost too easy. This bothers some ambitious people because it sounds trivial. They confuse the gateway with the destination. The 2-minute version is not the full habit. It is the entry point that makes the full habit easier to begin. A ritual of showing up matters because consistency grows from identity, and identity is strengthened every time you become the sort of person who starts. Clear's logic here is subtle and strong. A habit must be established before it can be optimized. People often try to perfect a routine they have not yet repeated. That is backwards. First, make it repeatable. Then make it better. First, become the type of person who sits down to write. Later, worry about how polished the writing session is. He also introduces commitment devices, which are wonderfully unromantic and therefore effective. If you know your future self is slippery, then bind that future self a little. Pay for the class in advance. Set automatic savings. Leave the phone outside the bedroom. Use app blockers. Put junk food in a place that requires effort to access. Build one-time choices that make repeated good decisions easier. This is not distrust of the self so much as realistic self-knowledge. Future you is not a separate species of wise monk. Future you often feels tired, bored, lonely, stressed, or persuasive in exactly the wrong direction. Commitment devices are structural honesty. They admit that good intentions decay when the moment gets uncomfortable. There is also a valuable lesson here about scaling difficulty. Clear does not say every habit should stay tiny forever. He says the starting point should be easy enough to survive inconsistency. Once the pattern is real, it can expand. But people who skip this phase often end up in the familiar loop. Enthusiasm, overcommitment, missed a guilt collapse. Making it easy also protects self-trust. If every plan you make is too big for your current life, you keep teaching yourself that your promises do not stick. Smaller, reliable actions may look less exciting, but they are better raw material for confidence. Confidence built from evidence is sturdier than confidence built from intention. The third law, therefore, forces a blunt question. What exactly is too hard in your current setup? Not in a dramatic existential sense. In a practical sense. Is the workout too hard to start because the clothes are not ready? Is the reading habit too hard because the phone is easier? Is the writing habit too hard because the session begins with too much ambiguity? Is the saving habit too hard because the transfer is manual and easy to postpone? Once the friction is visible, the plan becomes clearer. Reduce steps. Reduce decisions. Reduce setup. Reduce the need to negotiate with yourself. Good systems are often boring in this way. They turn future action into the path of least resistance instead of the path of noble struggle. This is also why Clear values automation. A habit that can be scheduled, preloaded, or constrained by default no longer asks for fresh heroics every time. The more you can rely on design, the less you have to rely on whatever emotional weather happens to pass through at 7:30 p.m. Thank you for staying with part 4. Next, we move into the fourth law, make it satisfying, where Clear tackles reinforcement directly. Immediate rewards, habit tracking, never miss twice, and why consistency becomes much easier when the brain gets a visible signal that the effort counts. Final close. The habit that wins is often not the one with the most inspiring goal. It is the one with the least friction at the exact moment a human being has to begin. The trouble with many good habits is that their real reward arrives late, while the reward for quitting often arrives now. Welcome back. The fourth law of atomic habits is make it satisfying. This is the part where James Clear deals with one of behavior change's oldest problems. The human brain is deeply responsive to immediate payoff. If the reward is distant and the inconvenience is present, the habit has an uphill battle. That is why bad habits are so seductive. The pleasure is often immediate. The cost is delayed. Good habits reverse the pattern. The cost is immediate. The reward is delayed. Exercise hurts before it helps. Saving money restricts before it liberates. Reading demands focus before it expands a mind. The brain does not naturally applaud future compound returns when the couch is already available. Clear calls this the cardinal rule of behavior change. What is immediately rewarded gets repeated. What is immediately punished gets avoided. The smart move, then, is not to wish the brain worked differently. It is to add some form of immediate satisfaction to good behavior and some immediate cost or discomfort to bad behavior. This does not mean turning your life into a sticker chart for toddlers, though frankly many adults would be improved by a decent sticker chart. It means respecting reinforcement. If you complete a habit and feel nothing except deprivation, the routine has weak emotional glue. If the habit ends with some small sense of closure, pride, relief, or visible progress, repetition becomes easier. Clear suggests using a small immediate reward that does not sabotage the larger goal. If you finish the workout, you may enjoy tracking the session, marking a calendar, moving money into a future fun account, or simply closing the day with the clean feeling of having kept a promise. The point is to help the brain experience the behavior as a win today, not only as a payoff in 6 months. That leads naturally into habit tracking, which is one of the book's most practical tools. People underestimate how motivating visible evidence can be. A chain on the calendar, a checkbox, a logged workout, a streak in a notebook, a savings graph that moves, a page count that accumulates. These signals are simple, but they make consistency visible. Tracking works for several reasons. First, it is a cue. It reminds you of the habit. Second, it is a reward. You get a visible sign that progress happened. Third, it provides honesty. It is harder to live in a flattering fantasy when the page is blank. Many behavior problems survive because the mind prefers a vague positive self-image over a precise record. Clear is careful not to turn tracking into the whole point. The habit matters more than the scorekeeping ritual. But when tracking supports behavior instead of replacing it, it becomes powerful. It turns abstract identity into visible evidence. I am the kind of person who shows up. Here is the record. This is where one of the most helpful lines in the book appears. Never miss twice. Missing once is an event. Missing twice can become the beginning of a pattern. Life will interrupt routines. Travel, sickness, stress, family emergencies, terrible sleep, unexpected deadlines, plain human mess. The standard cannot be perfect continuity. The standard is quick recovery. That rule is psychologically smart because it prevents the familiar collapse from one imperfect day to one defeated story. People miss once and then say the streak is broken, the system failed, I am back to who I was, so why not miss again? Never miss twice shifts attention from purity to resilience. The important thing is not never wobbling. It is refusing to turn one wobble into identity. There is deep sanity in this. Habits do not require moral theater. They require return. Can you come back quickly? Can you treat a lapse as data rather than a verdict? Can you restart before shame builds a longer argument? Clear wants habits sturdy enough to survive ordinary life, not delicate enough to collapse under one bad Tuesday. Then he adds accountability. An accountability partner or contract changes behavior because social and financial consequences can make the bad habit less attractive and the good habit more binding. If someone else will know whether you followed through, the moment feels different. If there's a consequence for skipping, the emotional equation changes. This works because reputation matters to people, even when they pretend they are fiercely independent islands of pure reason. Commitment feels heavier when another set of eyes is involved. The book does not say everyone needs a habit contract for every goal. It says accountability is another way to make the behavior more real in the present. Notice how the four laws fit together now. Make it obvious gives the habit a cue. Make it attractive creates desire. Make it easy reduces friction. Make it satisfying teaches the brain that the behavior was worth repeating. Good habit design is cumulative. Each law supports the others. A satisfying habit that is invisible still struggles. An obvious habit that feels punishing still fades. The whole loop matters. There's also a larger point about identity here. Satisfaction is not only pleasure. It is also integrity. One of the deepest rewards in consistent behavior is the quiet feeling that you did what you said you would do. That reward is easy to underrate because it does not always sparkle. But self-respect accumulates, too. So does self-distrust. Habits push both directions. This makes the fourth law one of the most emotionally honest parts of the book. People do not only need good intentions and clever systems. They need some felt reason to come back tomorrow. Progress has to register. Evidence has to be visible. Completion has to mean something now, not only in the fantasy future where everything finally pays off. Thank you for spending this fifth part here. In the next episode, we finish atomic habits with advanced tactics, genes and game selection, the Goldilocks rule, the downside of habits, and the final argument for why durable results come from the system you keep, not the single milestone you celebrate. Final close. A habit survives when the brain learns that repeating it is worth it today, not only when a perfect future version of your life eventually sends thanks backward through time. The final danger in habit building is not only failing to start. It is succeeding just enough to become stale, rigid, or blind. Welcome to the last part of Atomic Habits. James Clear closes the book by moving beyond the four laws into advanced tactics. This section matters because once a habit exists, the question changes. It is no longer how do I begin? It becomes how do I keep improving, stay engaged, and avoid turning consistency into complacency. Clear starts with talent and genes, and he handles the topic with more nuance than the usual fake equality slogans. Genes matter. People do not begin from identical bodies, temperaments, reward responses, or cognitive strengths. Pretending otherwise can turn self-improvement into a dishonest game. But the practical use of this fact is not surrender. It is alignment. His argument is simple: pick the right game. Or at least pick a version of the game that suits your natural tendencies better. If you're built for endurance rather than explosive power, train accordingly. If you think clearly in solitude, do not build your whole productivity system around constant collaboration. If you're detail-oriented, use that. If you learn verbally, lean into that. Habits work best when the system respects the person who has to run it. This is one of the healthiest ideas in the book because it replaces some envy with fit. Many people fail in part because they copy a strategy built for someone else's wiring. Then they mistake mismatch for inadequacy. Clear is not saying comfort should rule. He is saying the lane should make sense. There is a difference between challenge and misfit. Then comes the Goldilocks rule, one of the clearest explanations for staying motivated after the novelty wears off. People remain engaged when the challenge is just beyond current ability. Too easy and boredom arrives. Too hard and anxiety or discouragement takes over. The sweet spot is where the task still stretches you, but does not humiliate you. This helps explain why habits often collapse after early progress. At first, starting is exciting. Then repetition makes the behavior ordinary. At that point, the question is whether the system still contains enough challenge, variation, or measurable refinement to hold attention. Professionals stay in the game because they learn to work through boredom, but they also keep the standard sharp enough that boredom does not become total stagnation. Clear has a surprisingly stern line here. The greatest threat to success is not failure, but boredom. People know how to handle crisis. What breaks many streaks is monotony. The workout again, the writing session again, the budget again, the walk again. The same useful thing repeated on days that feel emotionally unremarkable. That is where identity and professionalism reconnect. Amateurs want inspiration to visit. Professionals show up when the task is familiar. Habits are powerful because they automate repetition, but mastery still requires attention inside repetition. You look for small refinements, cleaner execution, better timing, more precise feedback. The routine continues, but you are not sleepwalking through it. Then Clear turns to the downside of habits, which is a strong ending because it prevents the book from becoming robotic self-optimization propaganda. Habits save effort, but they can also reduce awareness. You can become so automatic that you stop noticing whether the routine still serves the goal. A habit can harden into mindlessness. You become efficient at yesterday's solution while today's problem has changed. This is why reflection matters. Systems need review. Are the routines still aligned with the life you actually want? Has the environment changed? Has your level changed? Has the behavior turned into checkbox theater? Habits are tools, not sacred objects. They exist to support the larger direction of your life. The conclusion pulls all of this together. Results are not usually transformed by one dramatic leap. They are changed by the trajectory created from repeated action. A habit is like entering a room and moving 1 degree. 1 degree looks negligible, but if you keep walking, you end up somewhere different. The real power is not that one repetition changes everything. The power is that it changes what the next repetition is likely to be. Clear keeps returning to the idea that every habit is a vote for the person you are becoming. That may be the most memorable sentence in the entire book because it turns habits from sterile routines into identity evidence. You're never only checking a box. You are proving something small and directional. This also explains why the book has had such broad appeal. Atomic Habits is not only about workouts, diet, or productivity. It is about behavior architecture. It gives people a way to think about change that is less romantic and more durable. It assumes inconsistency, friction, boredom, and imperfection will all show up. Then it asks how to build anyway. There is even a moral quietness to the book that makes it stronger. Clear does not promise that habit design will erase grief, randomness, bad luck, illness, grief again, or the complicated reality of being human. He promises something more believable, better defaults, better responses, better odds, better alignment between the person you want to be and the actions your days are actually made of. So it should remain after the last page. Make the cues obvious. Make the behavior attractive. Make the start easy. Make the repetition satisfying. Choose the right game. Keep the challenge alive. Review the system before the system hardens into stale ritual. And remember that tiny improvements are not trivial if they alter direction long enough. Atomic Habits ends where strong, practical books often end, not with a miracle, but with responsibility made manageable. You do not need a total life overhaul by Friday. You need a system that can keep casting better votes. Thank you for spending this full journey with me. We started with tiny changes in identity, moved through the 4 laws of behavior change, and ended with a long game of fit, boredom, review, and mastery. That is why this book lasts. It respects both ambition and human limitation. Final close. The deepest result of good habits is not only that you get what you wanted. It is that little by little, you become someone who can be trusted with the life you are building.